So hello, thanks for coming out. Let me do some thanks first before I both say something about the Trias reading series and about our first reader and this year's writer-in-residence, Piotr, Sommer, who's going to read tonight. So first I want to thank Peter Trias himself, who was a student here. Went on to go to the Iowa Writers Workshop and just ended up in real estate in LA and left us a sum of money to create this writer-in-residency program because he was a wise man, and it's turned out to be a great thing. And to the Provost's office as well, who supports us, and to Sue Gage, who keeps us running, and to Catherine Coles and to Melanie Conroy Goldman, my comrade in arms in running this Trias program and making it happen. And also I want to thank the General Trias support group, of which you all are members, but particularly all the faculty writers on campus, people in the translation workshop that we're doing with Piotr, anyone who loves literature and comes here, and people in the community like Teresa and Jake, who are here to hear the reading tonight and who have become friends of Piotr. That's a great thing. And also to other people in the community like Josie Claire, who, adding value to just our general atmosphere. So thank you all. I'm David Weiss. I'm the current director of the Trias thing. My job is to keep it going for this year, and some of the year I'll pass it off to someone else happily, like Catherine Coles, who will be next. And I just want you to say officially that what we passed out was a chapbook that we've done, that the Trias program has done of poems called Overdoing It. Last year we did Mary Gaitskill's section from her novel, A Small, Strange Story. It was a fairy tale for adults called The Devil's Treasure. And each year that's the thing we plan to do and give out to everyone who comes and is interested, and the community as well. So enjoy it. So it's a wonderful book, and it's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun making it with you and helping to shape it. Okay. So here's two things I want to say. I want to say something a little bit about what I've been thinking to do with just this Trias program in its third year. First year was we had Tom Piazza, a wonderful essayist, nonfiction writer, and fiction writer, as well as a writer of TV. How many of you were here for the Tom Piazza year? So a goodly number of you. Well, that was kind of a revelation and a great thing. The readings were fantastic, and likewise with Mary Gaitskill, it was just really something. It's kind of given us a kind of gift that we didn't know what it would be, and it's turned out to be just such a wonderful thing. We get both some sort of ineffable value from having hearing the writers that they bring. It just aerates us in a wonderful way. And let me say that this year, this fall, the first two poets that Piotr is going to bring is the distinguished Irish poet who was contemporaneous with Seamus Heaney, who just died recently, the Nobel Prize winner, both of them from Northern Ireland, both of them in their early 70s. But Michael Longley is a terrific poet, and he's going to be here in the middle of October, look for signs. And then we get the wild and crazy Slovenian poet, another great poet, named Tomáš Salomon, who will be here. Maybe some of you know him. He's really, he's in Josie's pocket. So it'll be marvelous when he's here. That'll be in the middle of November. And I should also say that the rather marvelous novelist, who has a new book out, that's her second book, The Flamethrowers, got a lot of wonderful acclaim, Rachel Kushner, is going to be here early in December as well. And then, I can't forget, Caroline Mannering in our department, a wonderful poet, has a first book that won a prize coming out, and she will give a reading at a point undetermined since the book is not yet in her hands, but when it's here, we will let you know as well. So there's an enormous number of things going on, and then we'll announce the spring stuff later. Okay, so what I've been struck by with each reading series is that the series itself, the writer who brings these readers, is sort of having a meditation or a conversation with us about what fiction or what poetry really is about. What it is that really matters in that genre. The thing that makes fiction fiction, poetry poetry, and to me, the thing that it's about has been about for each of them. And we'll see whether that's true. I think it'll be true this year too. It's about a kind of vitality. It's about the thing, it's almost about the thing that you can't really even study in classes. But it's the thing that underlies why we do that thing, study stuff in classes. Okay, and that brings me to what I want to say, which I'll probably read more than say, as a way of introducing Piotr Sommer. And that has to do with an idea. And that idea I'm putting out there not because it's true, but because maybe it's provocative, and maybe that's better than being true. But it has to do with the idea of anti-poetry. And by anti-poetry, I don't mean that anti-poetry is against poetry, not at all. I mean that often, individually and historically, poets revolt or rebel against a dominant notion of the poetic, the one that precedes them. They find themselves shackled or oppressed by modes of inauthenticity, or what's felt to be inauthenticity. Let's just say inauthenticity for them will no longer be authentic for them. And often that inauthenticity has something to do with a wrong kind of artfulness or some kind of trouble to do with tradition. And some traditions themselves can be a problem. So in American poetry, whether it's Whitman, or Emily Dickinson, or among the modernists, William Carlos Williams, or Allen Ginsberg, or Anne Sexton, or Susan Howe, the anti-poetic rises up to capture the condition of being in the world, in a time, and in a place. To find a way to capture that truly. And where the poet seems frivolous or poetical, counting on the familiar and predictable mannerisms to stand itself the real thing knows that the real thing is odd and hard and unexpected and no frills and unpretentious and simple and suspicious of language while at the same time devoted to it. In the case of Piotr Sommer, a Polish poet born in the aftermath of the Second World War and into a country that came under the shadow of the communist state, one of the things that needs to be gained distance from is history itself and its responsibility. In our translation group last week, Piotr spoke about the phrase for bearing witness, which strikes us here, I would say, as a solemn responsibility, but which, like all things, can seem like an imposition, a burden, something that can deform you rather than sort of call out the best in you. Call out something, well, inauthentic, something that is a bit deforming. So the poet's question, the honest anti-poetry of a poet, may be to ask, as Sommer always implicitly does in his poems, what do I feel? What do I think about this? What's really going on? And that, I think, is why we trust poems and go to them for some fresh air. And that is why we are here tonight to listen to Piotr Sommer read his poems to us. So, a round of applause and welcome.
Hello. Works. I thought it was going to stop after you. There's no reason for you. Well, I was expecting it sometime. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm very nervous, so I'm trying to crack a silly joke at the beginning. It's not working too, except the machines, nothing works. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm really grateful to the committee who chose such a wonderful. I went too far. Thank you, and thanks for coming. What I'm going to do is to read maybe about 25 old poems, some from my book Continued, and some from this lovely chapbook that was printed today, or yesterday, and maybe even on risk reading a few of them in Polish. So that's what I'm going to do. I was doing a little reading in Geneva in May, because David brought me here to indicate that I might be all right. And he managed to succeed in his schemes. But that was a small unit, and this is a huge thing, so I'm completely nervous. So I'm going to read them out for some 30, 40 minutes, depending on how we feel. If some of you don't feel well, we could bring some water. And I'll begin with a poem called Easter. Some of them are really old days poems, but yeah, because I'm an old day person, that's probably the reason. Let's go to places where we've been before, visit old friends, learn who this one or that one is. They have hands of gold and may live a little differently today. One sells dachshunds. With the last litter, he covered his roof. Another fences stuff, or maybe just receives it and moves it from place to place. The third experiments with his friend's words to see if the friendship survived and if it has made sense. In fact, the experiment proves it hasn't. And yet, another one works as a menial in Schleck. At home, the wife, a 3-year-old, the wife's mother, the silent father-in-law. So let's go to the old haunts. We'll take the children for a walk. And in the afternoon, eating a piece of cake, we'll watch television together. Let's go and see a friend to find out who we are. He probably knows. Celebrations. And there are always some old people coming from far away for the holidays. Strangers, relatives of your life, or of people you know. You usually see them for the last time and sometimes for the first, almost like portraits by old masters in a small exhibition. They want to stay striking. And they smile to you, to a few others, as though they wished to fix their photos in the air. Look, the whites of their eyes jiggle. Meanwhile, the food's getting cold. Vodka in tumblers is taking on the taste of glass, and they talk on, pushing their homemade cake toward you. The men are drowsy, the children sleep. But almost always someone listens to the end. A timid, well-bred young man old enough to drink vodka with the grown-ups. He's still a bit uneasy with women. He's still single. And now he nods politely at the words of a charming old lady whom he'll wind up taking to the station tomorrow after breakfast. cripplings. A child may be crippled on this like some gloomy trace of brushing up against a too ghastly dream, probably still in his mother's womb, or maybe somewhere else entirely. I don't know where. This 3.5 or maybe 4-year-old boy still isn't aware of his hair lip. Otherwise he's pretty and nicely dressed, and must sometimes go with his young mama to a cafe. But he still doesn't realize he's not supposed to look at me so normally, or exaggerate, bug out his eyes, make faces, chatter, puff out his cheeks like any other child. Sooner or later it'll turn out that in his mouth everything sounds odd, and that the grins don't fit his face. Though now his mother words mean only what they're meant to. Come to mommy, stop bothering the man, you'll get a little cake. And he'll go to her. And if you ask him if he liked it, he'll probably say yes. Oh, right. That's the plan. That's a brief one called A Boy. On an autumn evening, when there is no scary dog bounding in from the side, only the trees stand evenly, and grey puddles slip under the fence like cats. Let me read this one in Polish. It's short enough. We will survive that. Przestrzeń. Żyjemy w odosobnieniu pod dymami huty. Obszar na wschód i południe to Warszawa. Słońce dopada się, prześwietla pył. Rzeka jest niewidoczna. Nasz dom zbudowały małe mrówki. Jest mróz i prawie ciemno, biali ludzie wracają do domu. Autobusy poruszają się z trudem. Psy w domach miały dzisiaj ciężki dzień. Dziś, tak samo jak dawniej, są ludzie niepotrzebni. Lecz każdy z nich potrafi wiele zrobić, wiele znieść. Space. We live secluded under the smoke of steelworks. The area to the east and south is Warsaw. The sun is burning out and shining through the dust. The river is invisible. Our house was built by little ants. It's freezing and almost dark. White figures return to their homes. The buses can hardly move. At home, dogs have had a hard day. Today, just as before, there are redundant people. Yet, each of them can do a lot, and each can bear a lot. I knew it. This one might, if there was any reason for me to make any specific comments, I don't know. I doubt it, because they seem to be simple enough, those little pieces. But it seems, because David so interestingly brought in the subject of anti-poetry and polemics and all that. I think that this little poem, which I wrote years ago, and there's something about it that I still like, probably links with that polemical instinct, or was taken that way. It's called Hygiene. Today, for the first time in months, it stopped at 1 pack. This is how it sounds best, when the impersonal form gets into the ear by itself, when it speaks by itself. Until recently, the word we wasn't so annoying. But just listen to something like this. Today we have smoked only 20. Quite as if the author had asked for the floor in order to announce the projected estimates of consumption in the current year. Whereas he wants to speak unasked. So hang in there, my friend. Hang in there. Smoke, but not much. Speak, but unobtrusively. Now, maybe you will excuse me if I, for the sake of the meaning of the title of this poem, Hygiene, I will read one more in Polish. I didn't take it, but I probably remember it. Niedyskrecje. Gdzie jesteśmy? W ironiach, których nikt nie chwyci, krótkotrwałych i nieakcentowanych, w trywialnych puentach, które dyktują metafizykę niedorzecznym detalem, w piątku, co wypada na 5 listopada, w mnemotechnice dni. Można dać przykład i można to przyjąć na wiarę, kocią łapę, tak dalej. Lubi się jeszcze pewne słowa i te, za przeproszeniem, składnie, które udają, że coś jest z sobą łączy. W tych międzysensach zawiera się cały człowiek, łazi tam, gdzie widzi trochę miejsca. It's called indiscretions. Where are we? In ironies that no one will grasp, short-lived and unmarked, in trivial points which reduce metaphysics to absurd detail, in Tuesday that falls on day 2 of May, in mnemonics of days. You can give an example, take it on faith, cat's paw at the throat. And one also like certain words, and those, pardon me, syntaxes, that pretend that something links them together. Between these intermeanings, the whole man is contained, squeezing in where he sees a little space. This is a small poem with the proper name Zerań, which is part of Warsaw. Station lights. Station lights connect with those above. The days of the week connect. The wind with the breath. There's nothing that doesn't. The broken heating plant in Zerań and my child, and the woman I picked out years ago because of her white knee socks with blue stripes. Interesting how the world connects tomorrow and the day after that. If that's not it, maybe you'll tell me what is. Innocence. When we first met, we were really so young. I saw nothing wrong in writing poems about myself. Didn't I know that I too would be ashamed of something? Didn't I know who you were? Shame and laughter locked my mouth in turn. I'm ashamed to think of it. I'm amused to be ashamed. Believe me. You're not going to find a better place for these cosmetics, even if eventually we wind up with some sort of bathroom cabinet and you'll stop knocking them over with your towel. There'll still be 1,000 reasons to complain, and 1,000 pieces of glass on the floor, and 1,000 new eyes. And we'll still have to get up early. Yes, medicine. Maybe I should do this one. No, I cannot do this one in Polish because I probably don't get it. she thought. I didn't say it's a typically old days poem.
Sorry, good.
Yeah. Today it would be rather untypical, but yesterday it was fairly typical. Medicine. Again, I've seen the genuine lemon. Anya brought it back for me from France. She thought, return or else stay on. And what good reason holds her here? A few faces and words and this anxiety. The lemon was yellow and looked genuine. No need to display it in the window, so it could come to itself like our pale tomatoes. Or as we come to ourselves, ripening and yellowing for years. No, it was fully itself already when she brought it. Not so much yellow as gold and slightly narrow. So I accepted it gratefully. I'd like to put on the thick skin of the world. I'd like to be tart, but on the whole tasty. A child swallows me unwillingly, and I'm good for his cause. All right. Yes. Right, okay, I'll read this one in Polish. Again. I hope it's not too much of that. And we'll be problematic then. We don't want to be problematic. We want to be just the point. Yes, I have it. It's called Kolekcja Jesienna. It's a little bit longer than... That was a nice sound. That sheep made, right? He didn't even inquire, which maybe he's there. Kolekcja jesienna. A potem nic nie jest takie samo. Chyba, że w chwili nieuwagi albo zapomnienia, bo pamięć żyje czasem własnym życiem, a życie własnym. Ciało jest słabe, atakowane i ulega w końcu, wbrew wysiłkowi, żeby nie ulec. Ulega i nic potem nie jest takie samo. Stary człowiek się cieszy, że ma niewiele zmarszczeń, proste plecy, gimnastykuje się codziennie rano i chodzi na spacery. Ale ciało jest słabe, a kiedy ulegnie, nic już nie będzie sobą. Teraz chodzi po pokoju i szura tarczami. A kiedy indziej jedzie do godziny do innego miasta i nie domywa widelca u pszcza swoich snów. Wychodzi w deszcz i zaraz przemoknięte będzie całe panie. Wiodełkę z futrzanym kołniem. A potem jednak wraca zanocować i rano mówi delikatnym głosem: wstań, kazałeś się budzić o 10:00. Autumn collection. And later, nothing is the same. Unless in a moment of inattention or forgetfulness. Because sometimes memory lives its own life, and life its own. The body's weak, under attack, and in the end gives in despite the effort not to. Gives in, and later nothing is the same. The old person is happy to have so few wrinkles, a straight back, and to exercise every morning, to go on walks. But the body is weak, and when it gives in, nothing will be itself. Now to walk around the room, slippers shuffling. And another time, to visit a different city and not get the fork clean, drop the jar of honey. Going out into the rain, the overcoat immediately soaked through, the herringbone one with a fur color. And after that, still returning to spend the night, and in the morning saying delicately, time to get up. You asked me to wake you at 10. Later, when I was already very grown up and knew everything better, mother took on the role of child. She was even ready to listen, but got a little bored. A certain tree in Provonsky Center, which is a really wonderful, you look wonderful, they say, to Provonsky Center. because it's so old and looks so wonderful. A certain tree in Provonsky Cemetery. All memory we owe to objects, which adopt us for life and tame us with touch, smell and rustle. That's why it's so hard for them to part with us. They guide us to the end through the world. To the end they use us, surprised by our coolness and the ingratitude of that famous spinner, Mnemosyne. Grammar. What was one should speak of in the past tense? What isn't in some other time? Receding planets of the Rowan tree. And those botanical dictionaries, they always tend to mistreat us because they cannot quite translate the proper names of trees and plants in different countries and climates. So, let's hope this is a Rowan tree, I never know. It's the one that has those clusters of red berries, which are often eaten by birds in late autumn. Receding planets of the Rowan tree. There is always something more important. Little bottles half filled with cardiamide and caffeine, still alive. Even when empty, they're alive, since they stand by the basket of bread and the homemade gingerbread mix, and the still untouched jar of herb honey. The untidied apartment is alive. Not something, it's life. That is more important. The enlarged liver doesn't have to mean the worst. It could have tired itself with horns, brown bread and a bit of pork. The table drawer full of odds and ends would no longer be alive if it were put straight. If books were ordered in the closet, the photos in the album, the rest of the dirty clothes washed, the room repainted, they too would no longer live. It's necessary to eat. Take medicines, put the bowl by the bed, get out of bed, make tea and call the doctor, who won't wipe his shoes but mechanically rating out the prescription will say, "You have a nice picture there, madam." As a matter of fact, very nice. Especially in the afternoon when it catches the sun. Rain. The raindrop's shadow was crawling on my lapel like a flag, while the plane was changing lanes and position, and the engine shuddered. Toronto is rather flat, not visible from the air. On top of that, the wind was crumpling words. On the way up, the rain on the pane first wandered like mercury, then got beaten to bits and trickled off. All right, out of town. Years later, the water still drips. There's no one to tighten the valve. It courses through old pipes, down to the septic tank. Next morning, in the cellar, I start the motor with a stick. It shakes and rumbles and chirps. The switch is broken is all. At night, the water arrives illegally, undergroundly, to the very grave where last spring parsley sprouted. And at the fruit beside it, feral sorrel darkens, tastily and tartly, like clandestine sex. The motor lifts the spirits and returns to the night's deductions. It's morning. I hum softly, a stranger will replace me. In the cellar, a stream of light rinses the window grate. It pulses, strikes the meter. I catch my rhythm on the stairs. And for memory's sake, I hum as I pass the septic tank, a fluid underground song about sorrow and a stranger. A maple leaf. A maple leaf with the sun shining through it at the end of summer. It is beautiful, but not excessively so. And an ordinary electric train passing by nearly 300 yards away makes music light and unobtrusive, and yet to be remembered for its own sort of usefulness, perhaps, or even instructiveness. The world somehow doesn't quite say it knows everything, has a good memory, and above all, won't show it off. This one I probably should read in Polish, just to have a break. To give you a break when I'm reading too much in English. I still just getting in the sense of the music. Did I dare to say music? Did I do it? It's called ciąg dalszy. Nic nie będzie tak samo, jak było. Nawet cieszyć się z tych samych rzeczy nie będziemy tak samo. Nasze smutki będą się różnić między sobą i my będziemy różnić się między sobą zmartwieniami. I nic nie będzie tak samo, jak było. Absolutnie nic. Proste myśli będą brzmiały inaczej, nowiej. Bo będą prościej i nowiej powiedziane. Serce będzie umiało się otworzyć i miłość nie będzie już miłością. Wszystko się zmieni. Nic nie będzie tak samo, jak było. I to też będzie jakoś nowe, bo przecież przedtem bywało podobnie. Poranek, reszta dnia, wieczór i noc, a teraz już nie. Continue. Nothing will be the same as it was. Even enjoying the same things won't be the same. Our sorrows will differ one from the other, and we will differ one from the other in our worries. And nothing will be the same as it was, nothing at all. Simple thoughts will sound different, newer, since they'll be simply more newly spoken. The heart will know how to open up and love. Won't be love anymore. Everything will change. Nothing will be the same as it was. And that too will be new somehow. Since after all, before things could be similar. Morning, the rest of the day, evening and night, but not now. Yes. And there's a last few from the chat book. rush of air. Oh, days. Those were the most unyielding, fluid at first, then quivering. There was no way for them to ripen, come into their own, even at night. Continents, as if nothing ever happened, shifted beneath the islands, like dust and sunlight. And it wasn't clear what linked the days, because birds still moved through the air. Wind permeated the leaves, and breath was fluid. Full harvest. And it seemed it was time for us to die. Somehow right now, this afternoon, but the apples were bundled that year and ripened before autumn really showed what it was really made of. Even the suckers arced into branches. And now the sun is happily drinking water from the puddle at the gate and from the burdock-sized leaves of the lilac. But it's not warm enough for that. The day smacks of humidity. Again, the magpie chatters in its own way. And old friends, one after another, will deny us. And we would be the last to want to hinder them. No wish to overlook this, because how then would the others cope? Left high and dry, without a word for us. I guess I'll read two more and one more in Polish. One is called Żegary in August. Żegary is a very small village on the Polish-Lithuanian border. And there is no specific reason to talk about the grapes in Żegary, because I don't think they actually cultivate grapes. And yet, the grapes this year have not forgotten. They still remember how to be good, despite all the days marked scrupulously in the calendar. And despite the very different places, since next to the date you could write a name from the calendar of places. And even now, nothing good can be thought of someone like you. Only the days carry on, oblivious to other days, regardless of whatever happened between them. Long evenings, short nights. And what exactly happened, tell me if you know, okay? And the last poem, I don't know if I can read it very well in English, but so I need to read it in Polish because it has a pace in Polish that I'm not sure if I can reproduce just like that without remembering what the rhythm of the Polish is. So przegięcie. Przegięcie is a kind of overdoing it, but it is used in a kind of contemporary intelligentsia slang, basically, to indicate that maybe you're lying a little bit, or maybe you're overdoing, but there's something nice about its physical connotation. Przegięcie is bent. So there's something physical about przegięcie in slang. Cykady całą noc mierzyły czas, a ja nie mogłem dolec do snu. Byłem spóźniony o 3 godziny, potem o 4, potem 5. Liczyłem, że czas się sam wyłączy i pozwoli jakoś dojść do mety. A jednak i przez wiatr słyszałem, jak niemiłosiernie stukał, dudnił, to znaczy tykał bez miłości. I wcale nie śpiąc, śniłem, że się spieszy. Właściwie wiem, że pośpiech na nic się nie zda. Na nic. Wołałem refren, jakbym grał staccato. Lub własną nogą szarpał strunę skrzydła. Wtedy odkryłem, że to ja czas mierzę. Pocieram przestrzeń, tykam od środka. Że zasnąłbym na dobre, gdybym przestał. Overdoing it. All-night cicadas measured time. And yet I couldn't get to sleep. I was late by 3 hours, then by 4, then 5. If time would just switch off, let me somehow reach the finish line. And even through the wind, I heard how mercilessly it thumped and banged, that is, ticked on lovelessly. And without sleeping at all I dreamed, I was in a hurry, though I should know a hurry's no use. No use, calling out the refrain as if playing staccato, or plucking the wings string with my own daybreak. Then I discovered it was me keeping time, rubbing against space, ticking from the inside. And I'd sleep for good if I stopped. Thank you.
Question and answer session afterwards. So let's ask Piotr some questions. You notice he didn't take a lot of space between the poems to elaborate. So we can now have an opportunity to make it if he so wants.
Sure.
Yeah. You mentioned one of the poems didn't read well in English because the rhythm would have been off. How do you go about finding a good rhythm, especially going between the two languages?
Well, I don't know. Depends on it's probably the toughest thing. If there was a distinctive melody which involves the rhythm of the sentence along the line, and then of course that's what you would like to hope can be interestingly reproduced. But then your wish may not be fulfilled, and there's no reason why it should be, because if there is any sense and if there's any music in the poem or in the sentence, a sequence of sentences, the music and the sense of it is in your own language. So there's no reason for it to be translated in the same way. And you say, well, I have to live with that in translation. It may represent something that is going to be not representing all the other things. So very often you don't even aspire to translate something into this language or that language, because if you happen to have it, your general knowledge of the context, I wrote this side of the earth or the other side of the earth, the poetry context, the language context, the sensibilities context, the cultural context, may be too short to force the damn thing into this other sphere. And if it's too forceful, then it doesn't make sense. It doesn't do anything for anybody. Poetry doesn't gain on it. The foreign tradition isn't being represented interestingly. Yeah, and your own writing is not going to profit from it, because that would be my thinking, that the profit can be made only when there is something specific that cuts into the language of the foreign context, interestingly, in its time. while not lying to the original. That's about it. And quite a series of aphorisms, don't you think? that was tough. Yeah.
Who are your teachers? I mean, who do you think were responsible for your development as a poet?
Oh, the other poets?
Yes.
Whew. Well, it's a long story because I'm only, I mean, somehow it's too long for my young age, but I'd say naturally the first excitements were Polish poets. And these Polish poets who somehow didn't make it into the first rows of the establishment during my kindergarten years. People like Miron Białoszewski, people like Witold Wirpsa, people like Zbigniew Herbert, early Zbigniew Herbert, who was rather wonderful, and Wisława Szymborska earlier on, and Krystyna Miłowecka earlier on, especially. And yes, and Alexander Watt, a wonderful Polish poet who has a book in English. Not very big, but it seems to be a very good choice and very good translation. So that would be the beginning. And then you sort of felt that maybe the type of the anti-gesture, whatever that was, I didn't even realize that I was actually probably interested in that. You were looking for that all over the place. Once I started to pronounce and read the first syllables of English, I read quite a bit of poetry written in English, and back in those days, people like Charles Resnick, I discovered him, was a very important model of being aside and strong, and very somehow simple and lovely in language, in the way that the music of the sentence goes. This American poet who died in the 70s, and I guess later on, it was interesting to read a number of poets. It was interesting to see late phase of John Berryman with his sort of odd, funny and poignant and sad spoken melodies. But that wasn't very popular among my friends because John Berryman was supposed to be bad, you know, and a womanizer, and killed himself, by the way. So somehow that didn't, yes, and I even really, I must say that, I even loved the elegiac melodies in Robert Lowell very much. And then I was reading some of the New York school people quite a bit, and the excitement with which I was first translating Frank O'Hara and John Ashbery and Schuyler and Kenneth Coe, who seems to be quite a neglected figure, taking to be a humorous poet rather than because of that he doesn't deserve any serious comment. But you see, it's a foreign reading, so I have a different view in this case. I've never bumped into anybody in American poetry or English language poetry as movingly following the one specific translation of Kama Sutra, which I read in his instruction poems, so to say. I mean, the meditation of his instruction poems, and many of them take that. Yes, use that device. There's the art of poetry, the art of love. You even have a longer poem called "Sleeping with Women," and so on. So there's a lot of fun and lovely meditation that sort of like this, yes, like the language is the most sensitive instrument that carries the emotion and the music and some sense still, which is amazing to notice that there's still some sense in it. Yeah, and I guess that's about enough to try to reply to your question. Yeah.
When you read your poems in English, do you feel a sense of detachment from them, or do they still feel as much yours?
Well, I used to, when I first started to do that. But I got accustomed to some of the phrases in English now, the same way, I guess, as I got accustomed to some of the phrases in Polish of the poems that I translated, which I now feel like they have become, after this long time, a part of the English language, so to say. So I got accustomed to it, and when I have a better day to read, and I do not blunder that much as today, for instance, I feel all right with it, yeah. Even though, of course, there is a lot of things in the translation that, yes, that couldn't have been more subtle, maybe. But then there must be some certain face of the poems seem to be, now I have a sense of that, seem to be going across and, you know, getting across. Yeah.
Do you ever write any of your poetry in English directly, and do you feel?
I would rather abstract on that. Well, I may have tried in my scribblings, you know, to write a sentence or two. No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't aspire to be able to do that. I can hardly write anything in Polish. It wouldn't be good. My capacity of English, with English, my English is limited. I have a sense of what certain things in English do, but I may be mistaken. So I always need to be consulted. I did write a few articles when they were commissioned, and that's the best I could. I wrote a few pieces just once, for which I included, maybe ridiculously, in that book. In Continue, at the end of the book, it's a kind of little sequence of prose pieces, which it's not a poetry language, but there's something in its continuation about them that may almost bring the status to something off regular prose. But that was the only attempt that seemed funny. Yeah.
In Continued, there's a poem called "Don't Sleep, Take Notes," and it's
sorry, I didn't get the beginning.
In your book, Continued, there's a poem, "Don't Sleep, Take Notes." It's about a man who's worried about being able to pay the milkwoman, and he goes on to say that she'll take the leftovers, she'll take the house, she'll take my child. Was that drawn from a specific occurrence in your life, and is it meant to be comical or anxious?
Right. Thank you. Well, that's a typically oldies poem. But it probably was, as far as I was interested in going along the sort of quasi-political line. It probably would be taken politically as a political utterance. It wasn't. And I was, well, those milk people were very nice most of the time. They were bringing milk putting them on the threshold of your apartment or something in an apartment block in the morning. often at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. But that arrangement was common. So sometimes you were woken by the sound of the bottles, because they were glass bottles at the time. But that was already enough. But when you had a milkwoman who is knocking on your door at 4 in the morning and is asking you to show the receipt, that seemed a bit much. Have I answered the question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now imagine when you're reading it in English after having it in Polish, you may want to change some words because you have that license, as it were, because you wrote it in Polish. So in English, there are probably different versions of this.
No.
No?
No. Mostly they try to stick. Yeah.
So we don't try to improvise the English.
No, yeah. That's part of the dissatisfaction, so to say, right? Because you can only do certain things, but then you prefer to have certain things rather than a sort of free turn of, the poetical thing. No, you don't want that. You want it to be a little bit more modest in its subtlety, because it is. They are, rather than invent something that you go against the poem, even if it is sometimes a single word that you don't want the thing to turn that direction, because it will give everything an odd cap. And why should you wear caps when the weather is nice? Yeah?